Dankjewel. Dankjewel, Bas Korsten. The second speaker of today, his name is Peter Vandermeersch, and he is the chief editor of NRC. He's been there for a very long time, and he's actually moving to France because from September 1st he's going to be a foreign correspondent for them. And his talk today is about his work, so it's about news, but it's about fake news actually, because it appears that in times of crises, people actually turn back to the dailies and to the traditional newspapers to, as their main source of trustworthy information. So Peter can tell us all about that, so please put your hands together for the second speaker of today, Peter Vandermeersch.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what one of the most powerful people in the world is writing about journalism. He's calling journalists his enemies. It's not nothing to call somebody your enemy. You can criticize somebody, you can make fun of somebody, but call him or her your enemy, that's quite something. It says something. And he's not the only one. All around the world, in the Philippines, in Turkey, in the Netherlands, journalists are criticized in a way in which we wouldn't have done it like 10, 15, 20 years ago. They're kind of, in a metaphorical way, they're in a line of fire. And maybe fortunately, it's not only politicians criticizing journalists, it's also journalists criticizing journalists. Harold Evans on this slide. Harold Evans has been the editor-in-chief of the Sunday Times for 12 years. He says it's journalists who created, it's bad journalism who created Trump, who created Brexit. Joris Luijendijk, here well known in this country, who says after Manchester, after that attack, Ariana Grande, journalists and terrorists were cooperating. This is a picture I made when I was a couple of months ago in Mississippi. I didn't tell the driver of this car that I was a journalist, but imagine, fight for truth, punch a journalist. That's not nothing. And one only can see that we're quite far from what the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, once wrote about journalism, that he said that journalism maybe is more important than government. Mr. Trump is the 45th president, we're quite far away. And I said journalists are in a metaphorical way, they're under fire. Maybe this is much more important. They're literally under fire. This is statistics about every year for the last 30 years, 60, 70, 80 journalists are murdered. And I put up there the cover of NRC Next, the day after a couple of years ago, 400 kilometers from here in Paris, 15 people were killed on the redaction of Charlie Hebdo. And this guy, you know him of course, a man of the year according to Time, Mr. Khashoggi, murdered as a journalist, murdered in Istanbul by the Saudis. This is the world I still have now. I'm born actually in 1961, and I remember that world. And I have a son of 19 years old, and not so long ago I told him, I showed him this picture, and I say, I still remember that world. And then he said, are you born in 1961 or in 1861? Because it's so far away. Because obviously this is our world, and while that world which I was showing there, the train, was well organized, journalism was well organized, there was a couple of newspapers, there was a couple of radio stations, a couple of television stations. Now we have a zillion brands. This is our world. And moreover, apart from these professional brands, there is of course, and thanks to the thing all of us have in our pocket, to the development of smartphones, this is our world, the world of social media, the world in which already today 338 million tweets have been sent. This is being thrown at us. This is our media world. And who is in the middle of that media world? You, me and you. This is the cover of Time in 2006. And as you know, Time magazine, American magazine, each and every year they choose the man of the year. Hitler has been the man of the year, Stalin has been the man of the year, JFK has been the man of the year, Trump has been the man of the year, some of the popes have been man of the year. But in 2006, they did something special. They said the man of the year is you. And they put a little mirror on their cover. And they explained why it was you. They said, yes, you control the information age. Welcome to your world. They decided that each and every one of us was controlling the information age. This is the cover, which is maybe the most beautiful example about the optimism of social media. You were controlling the world. This is the time when we all believe that people in the streets of Damascus, of Cairo, of Baghdad, that they will win the revolution because they have the information. This is the time when we believe that it's not longer the big media moguls who will control the information age, but it will be us, each and everybody. 2006. And in 2017, 11 years later, the New York Times, one of the best media outlets in the world, writes a wonderful but scary article in which they're talking for the first time about the frightful five. And each and every one of us knows these frightful five. These 5 companies are named by the, or accused by the New York Times to be the frightful 5. Imagine this. Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, the frightful 5. And why? The New York Times says about them, they're bad. That's quite something. Saying about these companies, they're bad. And why are they bad? The B is from they're too big. They're not in the normal system anymore, the normal economical system, because they're too big. They're anti-competitive. They buy their own competitors. We know what Facebook is doing with Instagram and with WhatsApp. And they're addictive. We're starting indeed, last couple of years, we're starting to talk about those frightful 5 in terms in which we were talking like in the 70s and the 80s about the tobacco and the alcohol industry. And the D is maybe the most frightening thing they said about these companies. They say, they're destructive to democracy. That's quite something to say about a company, that company is destructive to one of the most crucial things of our Western society, our democracy. And indeed, that analysis of the New York Times has been repeated since, article is from 2017, over and over again. There's other headlines of the New York Times, and I could have chosen headlines from all over the world. The internet will be the death of us. I thought the web would stop hate, not spread it. The other day, I didn't put up on the screen, but one of the founders of Facebook, who wrote this wonderful article at the beginning of May in the New York Times, Chris Hughes, who said Facebook has to be broken up because it's bad for democracy. So in 2006, we were so enthusiastic. You were controlling the information age. And 11 years later, 12 years later, 13 years later, we're quite pessimistic. We're saying that these companies, which basically were the companies who could make the you of 2006, that they're bad, destructive to democracy, anti-competitive, addictive to big. And basically in that new world, there is 2 big words in that new world which is scaring us a little bit, and which indeed maybe is dangerous. There's 2 things why they could be dangerous, that new media world. And it's fake news. 5 years ago, I didn't know what fake news was. And of course, it was out there. Here there's examples about fake news. Fake news has, as long as there was news, there has been fake news. The chance that Bill Clinton was supported by aliens, I think it's fake news, to be honest. And that in the Northern Africa, dinosaurs are living together with Nazis, chances big that's fake news. But we didn't bother, because a day later, the paper was thrown out. Everybody forget. And of course, because of the internet, we don't forget anymore. Fake news is all over the place. A couple of examples of the campaign Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. But also a beautiful example of fake news on the Twitter account of one of most influential politicians in the Netherlands, Thierry Baudet, who at a certain moment tweeted this cover, saying that Time in 1977 had a cover, How to Survive the Coming Ice Age. While we're all concerned about the world warming up, he said, well, isn't this strange that in 77, one of the most important American magazines was still talking about the Ice Age. There's only one problem with that cover that Thierry tweeted. It never has been published. The real cover is this one, in which Time, and not in 1977, but in 2006, said the global warming issue. It's fake news, but it's very difficult to know that if you see it in your Twitter line. Fake news is one of the, we're only at the beginning, I'm afraid, of fake news. And one of the guys who knows everything about this is this guy.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. That's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources.
You see what happened here. We all were thinking, and definitely the first time I saw it, I also was thinking that President Obama was talking. He was not talking at all. Jordan Peele was talking. And Jordan Peele can make Obama say whatever Jordan Peele wants him to say. This is quite scary. We're entering an era, some people call it the infocalypse, the era of the infocalypse, the apocalypse of our information system. An era in which we cannot trust anymore what we read, what we hear, and what we see. At least now, when you see our Prime Minister talking on television, maybe it was a quote which was a little bit cut, which was a little bit put out of its context, but at least we know he said these words. Now we cannot trust this anymore. So fake news could really become a very important thing in this news world of the future. But maybe more important and more dangerous than fake news is something else, because fake news is news which deliberately is made in this way that it's not true, basically, for financial reasons or for ideological reasons or for other reasons. There is this other thing, and we know them quite well, and they lead to something which is this, to the news bubble. It's all about algorithms. We think that what we read, what we see, what we hear, that we decided. Of course we don't. Everybody of us on his or her Facebook is seeing other information. We're all, if we're 300 or 400 people here, there's 300 or 400 different news bubbles. And it's decided by algorithms. If we at NRC, if we publish an article, some of these articles really get spread over the internet and others don't. It's not us deciding, it's algorithms deciding, and they decide to feed you what you like to read, and they decide to feed you not what you not like to read. So we're entering this world of fake news and of algorithms. And in this world, and that's an important one, I think, in this world, Eric Schmidt of Google, he's a guy who really knows what he's talking about. He says it will be very hard for people, for us, for you, the you of 2006, to watch or consume something that has not, in some sense, been tailored for us. And also, Tim Cook of Apple, he says platforms and algorithms that promise to improve our lives can actually magnify our worst human tendencies. That's again the confirmation of what the New York Times was writing when the New York Times was writing about the frightful five. My point is, in this world, which is quite frightening to be honest, in this world of algorithms, in this world of fake news, and fake news on a big scale, and a scale in which it won't disappear the next decades probably, we have to turn to journalism. We have to turn to, and it's a bit a back to the future thing, to classical journalism from professional organizations. And the nice thing is that while I've been now for 30 years in this business, and like 25 years ago, we started to become very, very, very unhappy and very pessimistic, because we also were thinking, you will take over and professional organization won't be needed anymore to analyze in a professional and a good way the world around us. Now these professional organizations are becoming more and more optimistic and more aware of their responsibility. This is a couple of reports from the New York Times, in which the New York Times is writing about their hope in the future and the responsibility they have as a professional organization for maintaining the standards of journalism. I have been studying a long time ago at Harvard. And one of my professors there, probably to tease us a bit, to tease the students, he had in his office, good journalism is bad business and bad journalism is mostly good business. And actually, we're talking about the middle of the 90s, he was right. When you see at the British market, a quality newspaper like The Independent was selling 100,000 copies a day. A newspaper like The Sun, popular newspaper like The Sun, which was very famous for its page 3, where they printed every day a nude girl, the nude girl on page 3, was selling 3 million copies. Good journalism is bad business, and bad journalism is mostly good business. Well, the nice thing is that while this was true in the middle of the 90s, it's not true anymore. We realize, and we see it in the Netherlands, at NRC, at the Volkskrant, we see it at Le Monde in France, we see it at the Frankfurter Allgemeine, we see it at the Guardian in the United Kingdom. Good journalism is becoming good business, because in that world of all these brands which I was showing, and of all these things being thrown at you through social media, more and more people are looking for a very important thing. And the thing is the truth. What's the truth? And of course, the truth is very difficult. What's the truth about climate change? What's the truth about immigration? What's the truth about, well, you name it. It's very difficult. But yet, each and every one of us is looking for that truth. And crucially is the fact that we're turning to these classical news organizations, and these classical news organizations like the New York Times, or like NRC and the Volkskrant here in this country, are quite optimistic about the next couple of years. But they need to do one thing. And that's maybe the most crucial word of my whole talk here. They need to be trusted. And here you see the barometer of trust all over the world. And you see, for example, that in the Netherlands, 6 out of 10 people do say they trust their media. It means that 4 out of 10 don't. In the United Kingdom, it's only 4 out of 10 people who do trust their media. 6 out of 10 don't. In the United States, it's 3 out of 10 who trust their media. It's terrible, basically, that in the United States, only 3 Americans in 10 do say we trust our media, which indeed, in this new world, which I was explaining, are so important. The truth, the picture of the New York Times. By the way, the Washington Post has a wonderful baseline. I love it. It's like a movie title of a James Bond movie. Democracy dies in darkness. Oh wow! This is here again. Here you see how trust has been falling between 1973 and 2017 in the United States, from 7 people in the beginning of the 70s to 3 people right now who say they trust their media. And what's the solution for this? What should big news organizations, or small ones, what should they do to be trusted? And that's a question all the news organizations these days are really fighting with, are trying to grab, what should we do to be trusted? And I think there's 3 things we should do. I think we have to be much more accurate. All the news organizations, also the New York Times, also NRC, also NOS, you name them, they're not accurate enough. We're not doing enough fact checks. We're not doing enough research, investigative journalism. We're not making a distinction enough between facts and comments. We don't do enough field work. You know, all the news organizations in Europe, they were surprised when the British people voted for a Brexit. Each and every one of us. We all thought they would vote against the Brexit. All the news organizations in the United States were surprised that Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. None of them predicted it. Why is it? Because we basically were not accurate enough. We didn't do our field work. We didn't go to the so-called flyover states in the United States where Trump indeed had a big election victory. We were sitting behind our desks. We didn't do enough fact checks. So we have to become much more accurate to be trusted. We have to become much more trustworthy. And trustworthy is, good journalism is great journalism. People are not a saint or are not, well, most of us are not a saint and or a complete jerk. We're something in between. We're a bit of a saint and a bit of a jerk, and lots of in between. We're grey. The truth is grey. The truth is not black or the truth is not white. The truth is very grey. We don't dare to say we don't know. You know, I saw the other day, I loved it. One of these days when Theresa May was losing 5 ministers on a day, one of these Brexit discussions, and there was the BBC, and the BBC was standing in front of Downing Street 10, and from the studio they were making a link to Brian, who was standing in front of number 10, and they asked Brian, how's the situation today? And Brian said, I just don't know. I thought, this is great. He can't know actually, and he admits he just don't know. Next time when Brian says he knows, I will believe him. Because that time when he didn't know, he admitted. Sometimes I'm saying back in Amsterdam at our editorial staff, maybe every night or under every article we should write a kind of fixed sentence saying, this is the best situation as far as we knew it yesterday evening, but maybe we don't know it exactly. Because it's kind of, we don't know the truth. We only look through a loophole inside the Council of Ministers or inside a company or inside. So if we want to be more trustworthy, we have to use less anonymous sources. We use too much anonymous sources. We hide behind anonymous sources, things like that. We have to write about solutions instead of problems only. And we have to become more ethical than we are. It's true, in journalism, only bad news is news. If somebody comes in my office and says, Peter, I have been following the Minister of Defense the last year, and actually she's doing a good job. And the decision about Mali to pull out the troops there, well, everybody thinks it's a good decision. And the decision about the new fighter planes, well, yeah, most people support it. And Friday afternoon, when there is the Council of Ministers, Mark Rutte is really listening to her. Well, then there's a big chance that they say, well, what the fuck? She's doing her job. If that same person is coming in my office and saying, oh, everybody is criticizing Mali, everybody is saying that it's a bad decision about the fighter planes, Mark Rutte is not listening to her, well, then the chance is big that they say, come, let's look for a confirmation. We'll put this on the front page. And that's something weird, isn't it? Imagine you come from Mars and you have one copy of the Telegraaf to tell you about the world. People can't play football, at least men can't. All the people in companies, they're crooks and they're bad and everybody's being raped and this is really bad. So we should, and actually at lots of redactions, at lots of newspapers and other outlets, we have a program to write more also about positive news. And by the way, you don't like to read it. You say you like to read it. But when we put up an article about 100 people being hired or 100 people being fired, the one about being fired is read 10 times as much as the one of being hired. So basically it's your fault. We have to be more transparent. We have to tell more about our sources, what we tried to do, what we couldn't do, where we failed, where we have to be much more diverse in our editorial staff. So I think these three things, if we are more accurate, if we are more trustworthy, and if we are more ethical, we can only hope that we win back the trust, or keep, but win back the trust of our readers. And why is that so important? Because that trust basically means that one of the pillars of our democracy, journalism, is still there. And again, I should have put on a second time the cover of Time U. You can play, the public can play a crucial role in that. And we don't realize it, and we don't do it enough. Sometimes we say that a society deserves the politicians, has the politicians that they deserve. A society also has the journalism they deserve. And I only can urge you to hold your media accountable, to challenge your media to be accurate, trustworthy, ethical. It would be a crucial mistake, ladies and gentlemen, to leave journalism to journalists. Journalism is a fundamental part of democracy, and you have to control your journalism. It's a crucial role you have to play. In that sense, you are still in the middle of journalism. I thank you.